Sundays ago. And she was the last of my family. My mom and dad passed away a few years back. And my dad really worked hard trying to provide for us as a family. And he took care of us, and he took care of my sister in a way that she didn't have to worry about money or material things. But what my sister really was all about was family, friends, relationships, and love. My nieces had a lot of young girls that came to the house, and they all ended up calling her Mama, because she was able to give them some love when they would come there and encourage them and be a part of their lives. So Lana really didn't worry about the money part of life. She worried about the relationships. It was Malcolm Ford who first said that he who dies with the most toys wins. He said it kind of sarcastically, but most of us take it in a kind of more serious tone, and we try to work and build up our treasures here. But we have to understand that as Christians, that there's a retirement that we're looking for that has nothing to do with this world. Ours has to do with the bigger picture. Our earthly retirement is not it, but what is in heaven. The other day I went by to talk with Ron, and I'd gotten something in the mail about my Social Security and how much I could get if I waited a few more years or took it now. And we started talking about it. And Monday night we were leaving our vestry meeting, and Ron was talking with Jack Layfield, and on Jack's phone he's got this countdown to his retirement. It's like, 27 months, I don't even know, 10 hours, 5 minutes, 10, 9, 8, 7, but he's got it in his head that he wants to retire soon. Well, most of us are busy trying to accumulate stuff for our retirements. And even the young people, whether you're trying to think of retirement, you're trying to earn money, do things, buy yourself a car, get a down payment for a house, go on a vacation, something. We all are looking for money. So in light of that very human and very normal tendency, Jesus tells us a parable about a man that is working hard, making money for his immediate needs. But then he gets a pink slip, and kind of like Donald Trump on Apprentice, you're fired. But the strange thing is that the owner gives him a 2-week notice. So the manager starts thinking, what am I going to do now that I'm going to be terminated? So in light of this bleak future he has, he decides to take advantage of that 2-week notice. And he calls all the people who owe his employer money, and he offers to write off parts of their debt. Now, of course, this is kind of deceitful, unethical, maybe borderline criminal. But he has to figure out a way to take care of himself and his family when he is terminated. And we would think that Jesus would condemn this, but he actually doesn't. Instead, he compliments the shrewd manager because he's taken his current position and he's looking for a better future for himself and his family. So is Jesus telling us to be deceitful, to use questionable practices in work? I don't think he's condoning theft in the workplace. Now, that's not the point of what Jesus is talking about. He's actually trying to teach us a lesson so that we don't get caught up in making day-to-day decisions, only worrying about how we're accumulating wealth. He's not talking about our earthly retirement here, but the real end game for believers, our heavenly retirement. This is just another of the many teachings that Jesus gave to the point that how we ought to handle stuff. material possessions. Jesus' common theme is that the temporal stuff is important, but only if we use it for others in order to lay up for ourselves treasures in heaven. So in other words, this parable is teaching us how to deal with the stuff that God has dealt us. So we are stewards of God's stuff. And like the shrewd manager in Jesus' parable, we're actually just stewards of the things that we have. Only temporarily are they in our hands. In this parable, the manager is too lazy to work and too proud to beg. So because the owner's been gone and he's been in charge of everything, he has this chance to have a new way to live. So this shrewd manager, to win friends and influence people, takes all his debtors and he calls them in and he makes them the Monty Hall, let's make a deal of a lifetime, just so he will have a way to take care of himself and his family. Then the rich owner, who actually is God, commends this manager because he acted shrewdly. But this parable is not about us being urged to be deceitful, but to really act more shrewdly. The word shrewd is not intended to be used in a negative way. It simply means that we see the reality of our situations. We think through our options in a way that's most advantageous for all of us. So the unwise steward, whose focus is on the short-term goals, that's what he's looking at. When I was a teenager, I used to get to ride on deliveries with the older drivers, one, to find out the routes that we took, and sometimes help them unload. And there was this one time we were going and we stopped in Malvis, Alabama, and the driver filled up with gas. We went inside and I was standing off to the side, and when Smitty was his name, paid the man, the owner gave him back a little bit of money. All I saw was there was some money going backwards and forwards. And so when we got in the truck, I asked him what was that, and he said, well, he just gives us a little money back so that we'll stop in here and buy gas here. Well, it's that kind of short-term advantage, but this kind of stewardship doesn't help our real end game, us getting into heaven. This fall, Pat Burns is teaching a course called Financial Peace University. And when you think about money matters, those two words, financial and peace, seem to be polar opposites. Because in most families, some of the biggest arguments they have are over what do we do with the money we have. And I was looking up this statistic on lottery winners. 70% of the people who win a large lottery or get a large windfall are broke in a few years. In fact, 44% of them are broke in 5 years, and a third of them end up having to declare bankruptcy, which means they took all that money and didn't know what to do with it because they were using it for worldly gain. And what causes this sad statistic is just that, what Jesus is talking about. Not understanding the true priorities of what we do with our money. So Jesus is telling us that we've got to learn to guard our hearts when it comes to money. And we're warned throughout Scriptures not to be lovers of money. And when we deal with stuff with short-term temporal goals, money actually becomes dangerous because it causes us to forget what the real gain is. In 1 Timothy, for the love of money is the root of all kinds of evil. Some people eager for money have wandered from the faith and pierced themselves with many griefs. And then in 2 Timothy, the last book of Paul, He urges us, people will be lovers of themselves, or warns us, lovers of money, boastful, proud, abusive, disobedient to their parents, ungrateful, unholy, without love, unforgiving, slanderous, without self-control, brutal, not lovers of the good, treacherous, rash, conceited, lovers of pleasure rather than lovers of good. Paul wants us to be aware of what money can do to you. And in 1 Peter, Peter urges us to be shepherds of God's flock that's under our care, watching over them, not because we must, but because you're willing, as God wants you to be, not pursuing dishonest gain, but eager to serve. So we see in this parable, Jesus is trying to get us to focus on the long-term goals or the real end game, which is heaven. Our tendency is to focus on the immediate and not the eternal. The unwise steward focuses on the here and now, but the shrewd steward sees the bigger picture. So as shrewd stewards, we have to handle our stuff in a way that will bring a benefit for long-term use. In verse 9 of the reading, I tell you, use worldly wealth to gain friends for yourselves, so that when it's gone, you'll be welcomed into eternal dwellings. Here we see Jesus telling us to use our money, our possessions, and our wealth, even though it's part of an unrighteous system, to gain friends for ourselves, so when we're gone, we'll be welcomed into heaven. In the Sermon on the Mount, Jesus taught, do not store up for yourselves treasures on earth, where moth and rust destroy, and where thieves break in and steal, but store up for yourselves treasures in heaven. Jesus tells us that our worldly gains are temporal, and we base our future on this wealth, we'll surely die. We're to use our worldly wealth, our power, and our prestige, our spiritual gifts, to plant the seeds to produce a harvest, to God's glory and to expand His kingdom. In 1972, I graduated from college and I went to work at our seafood company, and my dad didn't put me at the top of the ladder. In fact, I don't even think there was a ladder where I was. I got every sorry, dirty, smelly job that we could have. But my dad was wanting to teach me something about how to treat people, how to look at the things that we'll be handling in the future. To say that my dad was conservative financially would have been a stretch. He really liked to squeeze a penny. And so he worked at trying to instill in me that same feeling. One time I was in New York City walking on the sidewalk right out of my son Corbett, who lives there up in Harlem. There were 3 shiny pennies on the sidewalk, and he keeps walking, and I stop. And he looks back at me and goes, Dad, what are you doing? I said, I'm getting these 3 pennies right here. He goes, Dad, you don't know where those pennies have been. I said, I know where they're going, though. And I wasn't going to tell this, but I thought about it. My dad asked me one time, about a year before he died, he said, do you reuse paper towels? And I went, yeah. Try them out and use them again. He goes, oh, good. I think he finally figured out that maybe I'd gotten the point that he'd been trying to teach me. He'd become confident that I could handle the job that I would be entrusted with. So God wants us to understand that we must be able to handle what He's given us. Our spiritual gifts, our talents, our intelligence. Sometimes we think we've had that on our own. Our money that we get from Him, so that we don't fall victim to their power. When we become mature in this, we'll be given true riches. And when God, who teaches us and looks into our hearts, knows that we can handle this little that He's given us, the very gates of heaven will be opened, and we will flood us with God's riches. So God's message this morning is that we're all in a position of being stewards of whatever He's dealt us. We can become unwise stewards and think that we're the owners of all our stuff. Or we can become shrewd stewards, seeing the bigger picture, the real end game. It's not about what you have, but who you are. And it's not about what you've gained, but what you've done and how you've lived and loved. And I started with my sister. She knew how to love. She was a real special girl. In 1948, she was born with spina bifida. Had a egg-shaped ball on the base of her spine, and a doctor operated on her, and consequently, thereafter, before she turned 16, she had 10 operations. And she didn't get to run and play and skip and hop when she was a little girl. And my parents used to love to dance. My mom and dad, they'd get out. We had a beach house, and on Saturday nights, the people that lived next to us, their name were Hendersons, they'd all get together and have a little party, play music, and dance. Every now and then my dad would take my sister and maybe dance to a slow Patsy Cline or a Hank Williams love song, I'm So Lonesome I Could Cry. And then in the early 60s, my sister didn't have an operation one summer. And she was sitting over to the side, and there was a new song out, a new dance craze. And so, me being me, I went over and I got her, and I said, come on out here on the dance floor, and let's get right in the middle. She said, you know I can't dance. I said, yes you can. I said, just hold my hands. And the old 45 chick dropped down the record, started playing, and it was Chubby Checker. Come on, baby, let's do the twist. And just hold my hand. And so I held her hand, and I got her where she was just twisted. She was just twisted. And I twisted down, and I twisted up, and I twisted like this. I was getting it, and she twisted. Sorry. Anyway, after about 180 seconds of that, I took her back over and set her back where she was, and everybody started applauding and hooting and hollering, telling her, way to go, Lana. She finally got to dance, a fast dance. Lana knew what was the most generous part of her was her love, her character, not her money, not her possessions. She really never knew what she did have. So this morning, I know that we usually play kind of a slow song that we can meditate to, and this morning I asked Lisa if she would play a song for me, God's Great Dance Floor. Because I know my little sister, 2 Sundays ago, Jesus took her up there and danced. And I don't know if King David broke in and wanted to dance some himself, as he was prone to do, but one day I'm going to be up there and I'm going to see if we can't run down the streets of heaven together and dance. So this morning, as the music team gets up here and plays this song, I just hope that y'all will stand now as we enter into a time of ministry of worship. There will be prayer ministry.